Namaste and welcome to this volume 27 of Ask Helen Anything. And just before we dive into the comments and questions that have been left under the previous one, just a little, if you're new to the channel, into these teachings, then any questions or comments that you might have that you want me to address around awakening, if you want to leave a comment under this video on YouTube, then we'll address it next time around. We try to do it once a month, but depending on my schedule with retreats and things. So this has been 2 months since the last one, because we've been on retreat. So if you have anything you want to ask or to be addressed, just leave it as a comment underneath here and we'll look at it the next time. So without further ado, Karen, whenever you're ready, if you'd like to start reading the comments, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. So our first comment is from Vuchika, and she says, I love your enthusiasm at the end of the video. Well, a bit about the breakthroughs. When I listened to today, I had this idea, but I'm actually this. And it was not only mental, I felt it deeply. It felt so powerful and fulfilling. It is this being that is looking through my eyes. I felt it without dualism. How do I explain it? It's more a matter of speaking. It lasted quite short, and I keep on forgetting it, but who knows, maybe it will stay with me longer. But this is a life changer, I see. Thanks, and I appreciate a lot of your books. I think I read them all. They are amazing. Funny they are not more popular.
Oh, thank you. And it's always changing, isn't it? It's life-changing when you see who you are. It's one thing to read about it and hear it, but to have even a momentary glimpse of it changes everything. Because you can't really go back to believing the mind stories with such conviction. And we do go back, of course, several times, who knows how many times. But each time we've seen who we are, it's a little clearer that those aren't true, and a little harder to believe them. And you see it quicker and you come out of it faster back into what's true. So just whether that's through meditation or inquiry, self-inquiry, and there's lots of videos here on the YouTube channel to help you with that. And just keep seeing who you are as often as you can, who you really are. The one formless emptiness, awareness, consciousness, presence, whatever you want to call that. That which is not a thing, not an object, not a person, in which the body is appearing. And it just becomes easier and easier to be like that, right? At first, it's just a little glimpse like you had, and eventually it just gets clearer and clearer, and it stays for longer. And life is going to ask you to look at the ideas that are in opposition to that, such as ideas that we're not good enough or that we're not safe. This is the ultimate safety, to know who you really are. So glad you had a breakthrough, just gently inviting that again to come back. I'd like to see that again with a really soft intention there. So thank you very much. Thanks, Karen.
This next comment is from Deanna, and she said, absolutely love these. Thank you, us, the one that we are.
Thank you.
And this is from Benetton. Helen, gratitude for your remarkable patience and loving, insightful kindness here. My next Ask Helen Anything arose from the depths of my most sublime inner state. Does Helen have tattoos? What are they? Do they symbolize something? Where are they? Could you point them out?
The deepest questions of all, right? Yeah, I have 4 tattoos, and some of them I can't and won't show you, for fairly obvious reasons, hopefully. But they symbolize things that are important to me. There's one that really begins to it points to me of loving service to the divine, and that is sort of around here. And then I have 2 on my back. One is like angel wings with a sword going through it, representing the sword of truth. And the other one is representing love, lower down the spine. So you can see the theme. And the final one, I don't know if I can show you, it's a combination of runes. I don't know if you can really see, And it's I've always had a fascination with Nordic runes and memories of previous lifetimes, imagined lifetimes, of course. And it just symbolizes that when you put them all together, the effects of the energy are very, very powerful. It's supposed to be an energy boost and convey a clearer ability to communicate more directly what I want to say. And just like everything in manifestation, it's a vibration, it's a frequency. And I just like the runes too. You know, I've always had that fascination with them. So yeah, most of them I can't show you though. So they are. I've always been fascinated with tattoos and slightly addictive on my part. So I make myself wait at least a year before I get it. If I still want it after a year, then I go for it. But they don't particularly have any uh purpose other than I like them. So yeah, hope that helps to answer your deepest question. Thanks, Karen.
Our next question is from Shafi. Thank you, Helen, for answering questions so honestly and relatably. As I delve deeper into this path, I feel an overwhelming and powerful pull towards meditation and the books and topics that resonate with me, so much so that they overshadow almost everything else. This desire to immerse myself completely in this domain is so strong that I want to dedicate all my time to it. While I continue to fulfill daily responsibilities, I often receive feedback from others suggesting I should focus more on improving my job skills or exploring other interests. Given this intense pull, I'm unsure if I should try to balance this passion with other aspects of my life, or if it's okay to fully it. Do you have any guidance on this?
Yeah, it was very similar for me. And I think it's a very common experience because when we start to realize what we really want, which is to recognize who we are, it really becomes all encompassing. And to me, the point of obsession. And I think that's a healthy thing. The obsession in this area is a very healthy thing, provided that it's not impacting the rest of your life. So if you have responsibilities, if you're a parent, you have a spouse or something like that, and it's starting to impact relationships or your work, your ability to look after those who might depend upon you or look after yourself financially, then perhaps it needs to be looked at. But if we have any control over where our focus goes what we're most interested in, what we're most in love with. And many times on the path, I've been told to just get a normal job, stop being so weird, mostly by people who are very close to me, well-meaning intentions, and not really understanding that life as a normal person just did not work for me. I was never very successful at anything really in the long term in the world. And it's not a denial of the world. It was just that I was operating from the wrong idea of who I am. And actually, life now in the world is easy and effortless and fun and sometimes difficult, sometimes challenging, sometimes whatever human life brings, but it's met with a real intimacy from that knowing of who I really am. So all of that is to say that maybe trusting yourself more. Those others who have sometimes well-meaning advice, and sometimes not well-meaning, sometimes critical and judgmental, are a reflection of our own self. So while I was at odds with myself for being so obsessed with this path, I tended to have outer voices telling me the same thing, that I should be, just not so focused. But in the end, the capacity to focus on this long enough to really become and live as that infinite self, not become because we are it, but to live as it, let it permeate our whole human existence, is one of the most powerful things we have, the capacity to stay with something long enough to achieve it if we look at how we've achieved any success in the world or in our awakening, it's been that we've stayed with it somehow until it's just inevitable. And this is no different. So I'd just suggest looking, is it having a negative impact on your human existence? And if not, then have at it. You know, if it's not impacting your relationships, and all of that and your ability to function as a human being, then have at it, be obsessed. It's the same for me, for a lot of beings. And sometimes we have to go so far inwards into our own self, and then we come back out. And this truth that we are wants to express itself as our life, and it will touch every part of our lives if we let it. And really beautiful things begin to happen that couldn't when we had the wrong idea, this idea that we are a separate person. So sometimes the advice from others is well-meaning, but really it's coming from perhaps someone who isn't ready to transcend this idea of separation yet. And it takes a certain amount of focus and persistence to kind of free yourself from the illusion that everyone else is constantly reinforcing around us, except perhaps our Sangha, our spiritual community. Everyone else is going to agree with you that you're a separate person. So there needs to be a little bit of power building and a focus, like when you hold a magnifying glass under the sun on a hot day and you hold it still. There's going to be some smoke starting soon and a little fire, right? And we kind of have to hold our attention on this long enough to catch fire with the truth and to let that burn all the illusion. So my instinct is that you're doing absolutely fine. It only becomes a negative thing when it starts to impact relationships, which it did with me also. And I had to really look at that. And to say, you know, to come to a point where, what am I doing all of this for anyway, this awakening, if I can't really be in my relationships, be in my family, be in my, all of that. And then there was some kind of balance that came. Usually, if someone is using their spirituality to avoid their life, there's some negative emotion that we're not really willing to look at. And I did that too, you know, hands up. Everyone does at some point. But eventually the truth of who we are, the loving presence of who we are is going to nudge you back into those relationships to allow it to express itself. So you can't really go too far wrong with that. But just maybe taking a good look at your life and is it functioning okay? You're paying the bills okay? Your relationships are going okay? Then there's no worries. And trust yourself with that, right? Trust your own judgment with that. Thanks, Karen.
The next comment is from Millie. Love you, beautiful being, very helpful. And we also have a comment from user Amita. She says, you're such a gift. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a comment from Crazy Tunage. She says, with the help of gurus such as yourself, I've come to realize that virtually all of my personal suffering has been caused by my ego. As I comfortably sit here in front of my computer in the cool AC, I realize I have the luxury to develop my own little slice of heaven here on earth. I'm also aware that not all souls are as fortunate as I am. Why is there so much violent brutality within both man and nature when everything is already perfect and whole in a world created by pure love? Some of the horrors on this planet seem completely pointless and without a drop of love. I realize this is more ego wanting answers, which can never bring me peace. But I also see that this is harsh reality, that this harsh reality has influenced many atheists and hopelessness. I was hoping you may have insight there around this.
Yeah, it's a question that comes up very often. If all this is made out of love, why is the planet in the state that it is? And I don't really see brutality in the animal kingdom or in nature. I see that some animals kill, but they don't kill for pleasure or they don't cause harm on purpose so much, you know, like human beings would. Really, the challenges are in the human kingdom and the way we treat perhaps those other species and ourselves. And for a long time, this was really hard for me to reconcile. having seen the formless emptiness of my own self, it was the essence of love, as you said. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it's um, all there is, and it's appearing as all of this. So why does it appear in such very contracted ways? Why does it appear to be the opposite of love? Why does it, all this brutality, violence, hatred, all of those things that we see in the human kingdom that we would like to eliminate? And it's an important question. I don't think it's coming from ego. I think it's coming from the infinite self trying to reconcile what we see in the world with what we are seeing in our hearts. How does that fit together? And in my own journey, I had to look at this quite deeply. And it became clearer that what we see going on in the world is really when the results of this belief in separation. And wherever we're at along our journey, as our soul has had many imagined lifetimes, many bodies have come and gone. And not all are as fortunate as we are, like you say, to be waking up to the truth and be able to do it in a fairly comfortable way, to have enough food or whatever it is, the basic needs for existence to be provided for. And that is really the effect of this idea of being a separate being that permeates most of the human consciousness. So there isn't really such a thing as hatred or any of that, but the disallowance of the love that we are, when it's got to try to penetrate through this thick idea of separation, and our thought structure is very set in that separation. It looks like hatred. It looks like violence, of course. It looks like someone would want to intentionally cause harm. So as the love that we are has to try to penetrate through these thoughts, it appears as self-centered behaviors, grasping and hoarding, and not distributing resources fairly, and all of those things that we'd really want to see. It appears as violence and everything that we want to change. And when we are still very unaware of who we are, that really results and looks like narcissism and self-centered behavior, etc. And really, it's only when we begin to realize that our activities, our actions, our everything that we do, it has an impact on others, that we can actually begin to evolve. We were at a certain point in our evolution previously where we didn't even realize our actions affected others. And it may seem really weird now to think in that way, but there are human beings on the planet that haven't evolved enough yet as souls to do that. So everyone is living from whichever place they're at in their journey back towards the realization of who they are. And those that are very caught in this idea of being a separate person, needing to get everything from the outside in that they need for survival, they're caught in this greed of needing to gather things towards them and keep them for themselves. And then this idea of trying to control others, making them feel safer, more powerful, because they don't feel safe and powerful deep inside. And as we gather resources and seem to have control over other beings, we might have some temporary sense of security. And that's all we can do at that point. So as human consciousness, as awakening becomes more widely known, and maybe even eventually that this is the goal of all human existence, then it won't just be one or two awakened beings. It will be perhaps an awakened being in every country, perhaps in every town, every city. And the level of consciousness from which most human beings are living is going to change. It's going to begin to change. It might be, instead of I've never heard of awakening, it might be, well, awakening, yeah, I'll get to that at some point. Right now, it doesn't interest me, but it's there as a seed in our consciousness that this is the ultimate goal of all existence, human life. So everything that we're seeing that we would rather not see is all due to this effect, this idea that I am a separate person, separate to everyone and everything. When that idea gets contracted enough inside, we see whatever we see on the news, in the media, what's going on. But there is also something else happening. Let's not ignore that. There's also something else happening on this planet that you will not see in the media. And that is a slow but gradual gathering pace of the self, the infinite self, recognizing itself through human form, because that's the only form it can do it in. And so there is something else happening. And it's important for us to, of course, be informed about what's going on, but not to let it completely dominate our whole idea of how the world is. Good news is never going to make the nightly news, right? Or maybe it will when enough beings awaken. Can you imagine if we started the news here in the UK? We used to have this news at 10. And here's a list of all the miracles that have happened today. Here's a list of all the beings that have woken up to their true nature today. Wouldn't that be a very different planet? Something we look forward to. So I hope that helps you to kind of reconcile the idea inside. And I think it's an intelligent question that needs to be asked. Otherwise, it just holds us back. And I'm glad that you did. So thank you, Karen.
This next question is from Courtney. She says, "Hi, Helen. Thank you for taking questions. I really appreciate it. Interacting with others and being out there in the world is draining and exhausting. Does it get easier? Do you have any advice on dealing with loss of loved ones, specifically longing to talk to them? I've been fully experiencing emotions for a while, but there's still a lot of anger and grief left. Thank you."
Yeah, so your first question, I think, was about interacting with others, and it is exhausting. There's like a middle stage, right, where we have seen or started to see or started to even get an inkling of who we really are. And yet our thought structure is still in separation. We might go back to thinking about other beings, even if we don't realize we're thinking in separation. If I'm thinking about someone, then they seem separate to me. And that's one of the most challenging places in our awakening, because we've seen a little bit of who we are. We're starting to know and understand that there's only one being. Yet our thought structure is so very opposite, and that's quite taxing on the body, quite exhausting. And for me, there was a period where I just really hibernated and isolated myself as much as I could until I realized what was actually going on with this. And it was the idea of other beings that was exhausting and not the actual other bodies, right? And I had to really look at it. Are there really any other beings? And look at that for quite some time, until the point where I could sit in, a couple of weeks ago, I was in the airport coming back to the UK, and it was absolutely packed. But I didn't feel any different. I wasn't suffering. I wasn't being drained by that. I still prefer to be sat here in my home, with some quiet time. I prefer that, but I'm not suffering, and I'm not isolating myself from any kind of need to hide like I used to. I spent a good few years hiding quite successfully. It was quite a boring period of my life, actually. So just checking out that idea deep down inside, and it will also help with your second question about the grief and the emotions. There's no script, of course, for how long grief takes to process. And as a human being, we are taught very little about how to deal with any emotions, let alone grief. It's an anger. But from a spiritual perspective, the best advice would be to feel it as much as you can, to let yourself feel it, which is not always easy. You don't have to like it. Nobody's ever going to like grief or anger. But then also to question the ideas behind, because each emotion that we have, negative emotion, is telling us there's a story that we're believing that we can begin to transcend. And the idea behind anger, it's a feeling that life isn't fair, the feeling that we can't get what we want. Usually right in the gut, right, the solar plexus area, but sometimes other places. And grief is telling us that when I looked at grief for myself, this idea that I've lost something or someone that I need to be happy. I need that something or that someone, and I can't get them back. There's a futility and a hopelessness behind that. And when I looked at both of those beliefs, I had to look at fear and shame and other things as well, to their stories too. Then the common theme throughout those emotions was the belief in other beings or other things. And grief is really a belief that we have lost something and someone. And yes, that physical body of that being is no longer here. And we're no longer able to interact with them physically. But who they are, the consciousness, the one self, and appearing as an individual and yet not separate soul is still here. And there is still some communication possible with them. So all of this is to say, awakening will deepen your capacity to just feel what you're feeling, even if it's something you would rather not feel, especially if it's something you'd rather not feel. You're going to find it very hard to avoid any emotion as the true self, the infinite self that you are. And with that also comes greater capacity to inquire into what this feeling is about. So I'd really urge you to look for the stories and then to question, is that true? Have I actually lost something or someone? If I am all there is, if I'm everywhere. And this isn't, we actually use the contemplation technique on the YouTube channel. There's a playlist to help with contemplation questions. We turn it into a question, is that really true? And we stay with it for as long as we need to. But just to say, it isn't a denial of what you're feeling, contemplation. It isn't an avoidance. It's a very real capacity to be with that emotion whilst getting the deepest message that we can, the deepest teaching from that emotion and that story. All stories that the mind tells us are in separation. And unfortunately, we've only really been taught to process death from a place of separation in our thoughts. And of course, you're always going to miss that person, but there needn't be so much suffering there, right? And allowing the process, allowing the emotion, totally, if awakening has given me anything at all, it's given me lots of things, but perhaps one of the most beneficial things is the capacity to actually be in my life, to feel what I'm feeling, to be human. And most of my life, I was trying to avoid that, trying to hide away, like I was saying. So can you feel what you're feeling? Can you give yourself permission a little more to engage with that emotion? There's no absolute with that, right? You just do what you can today or right now as you're feeling it. And gently curious as to what the idea is behind the story and behind the emotion, rather. And for me, grief was telling me that I'd lost something that I could not get back. And I had to finally start to admit the body has gone, but is that being gone? And that shifted my whole perception of death and relationship to a different place. So I really hope that that's helpful. Sending you lots of love and encouragement, and obviously a very challenging time for you. Thank you, Karen.
Our last question is from Ananda. How do you explain a principle called non-possession or aparigraha? Thanks, love and regards.
Thank you. I'm assuming that you're referring to the yamas and niyamas of the 8 limbs of yoga. That's the only time I've encountered non-possession. So if you're referring to something else, unfortunately, this answer won't apply. But non-possession is basically transcending the idea of separation. If there is no separate being, there is no way to possess anything. And We only struggle when we think we own things or possess things. Even this body, if I have the idea that it's mine and that I can use it and all of that, then eventually I'm going to struggle when it goes. I'm going to really feel in trouble when it goes. So the idea of me automatically invites the idea of mine. Mine follows on from me. This belongs to me. And that could be my emotions, my thoughts, my body, as we're saying, my awakening, even my desires. On and on they go. There is a body, there is desires, there is thoughts, emotions, but can we prove that they're mine? Not really. They seem to be, but when we actually look and find out who we are, then there's this expansiveness, this consciousness, this presence that we really are, which is appearing everywhere, and all things are appearing inside it. So it's really to transcend non-possession is literally not to think we're possessing anything. To recognize that everything that I would think I'm possessing is just another way I'm appearing as the infinite totality, the self, the presence. So there's a body, that's true, but I don't really know it's my body. I certainly don't know it's my thoughts. And at a certain time I was convinced they were my thoughts, and then they stuck to me like glue. And that idea is like, they all hang around. My karmic patterns, my awakening, all of that, we can eventually have to let all of that go. Without the idea of possession, then there's no capacity to hoard or to accumulate. That's not to say we might not have enough money in the bank. That will be more likely to happen without this idea of possessiveness. When I'm not so sure that it's my money or my debt, then the flow can flow better. It's supposed to flow. It's a currency. It's a current. It's to flow. But when we think it's mine, we kind of stop at the energy, and it just doesn't, my savings, my work, my debt, my income, my bank account, on and on it goes. So just looking at this idea of separation, from which is born this idea of mine. If I'm a separate person, then I'm going to believe I own my children, my spouse, my parents, on and on it goes. My resistance, all of that. So do you own anything at all? Do you want to still be sure of that if you can see or even intellectually understand that you're not who you think you are, that you are that in which the whole universe is appearing? If you want to own anything, possess anything, then possess the entirety of it. Don't just take a small piece and say, this is mine and this is me, which is where we struggle with it. So I hope that helps to answer the questions that you sent there. It's a common question that comes up, but it's really very, just like it says, non-possession, not to possess. Most of all, not to possess ideas, right? Don't keep them as yours. Let them be there if they're their thoughts, but don't possess them. They're not mine. That's just a thought too, right? And from there's freedom. So thank you, Karen, there for reading so beautifully, and as always. And thank you for your comments and questions here under previous video. And just before we finish, as I said at the beginning, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them underneath this video here on YouTube. I know this goes up on Facebook and things like that. So if you want something addressed, it needs to be under the video on YouTube, not Facebook, etc. And we'll address it next time, which will probably be roughly a month from now, something like that. So thank you very much. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you.